Welcome to the Send More Offers Real Estate Show with Brandon Barnes, showing you how to do wholesaling deals consistently without having to go on seller appointments. Learn the key tips and strategies that Brandon's students use to find deeply discounted properties that are pennies on the dollar, all while avoiding wear and tear on their vehicle, body, and freedom. Whether you're looking for your first deal or your next deal, it's time to send more offers with your host, Brandon Barnes.
Hey, welcome to the show, Jenn and Joe. How are you doing?
Awesome. Thanks for having us on. We're doing awesome today.
Yeah, look, I'm super excited to have this conversation, especially when I connect with folks within the mastermind that we're a part of, because, you guys are usually already doing such a high level of real estate investing. And I know that's no different from what you guys have going on in the creative financing world. And that's always great, especially our listeners maybe start with regular cash transactions. Creative finance can sometimes be scary. So I hope that you're ready to demystify that for the listeners.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not as scary as it sounds or seems once you start learning about it.
Yeah. So tell me, did you, when you got into real estate investing, were you going after deals that you can creatively put them together? Were you doing some different type of real estate investing early on?
Yeah. So when I first got started, it was 24 years ago, the year 2000. And one of my friends, I was at his house, we were hanging out, and he actually bought some course on a late night commercial way back when.
Carlton Sheets or something?
It was Ron LeGrand, who was actually part of the same mastermind. Yep. So it was pretty cool.
Close enough.
And he never opened it. Had it for like almost a year, never opened it. So we just happened to be at his house one day and I saw this. So I asked if I could borrow it and he let me. And I opened it up for the first time and there was a VCR tape. There was a couple audio cassette tapes and there was a book. And I read the book, watched the tapes, listened, and I did what it said. So, which really aligned for me because I was 22 years old. I was broke, had bad credit and no money. So this was a great way how to get started in real estate investing without having all that stuff. So what I learned in the very beginning was wholesaling.
Okay.
But it really wasn't like, there was no YouTube yet, right? So there wasn't people like talking about it. So I'm like, wow, I could actually do this. So I did what it said. I had a deal under contract in about a month and I bought it, did a double close. The first house I ever owned, I made like $15,000. By the time it all settled, it was like 12.7. I was like pumped when I got that check, boy, I will tell you.
I bet.
So that's what it was like. Hook, line, and sinker. Love at first sight. A lot of drama that happened with the deal because the seller lived in a different state. But we made it happen and we pushed it through the finish line. And so that's kind of what happened. And then really fast forward a bunch of years later, I have a job at a car dealership. I meet Jenn. She's a school teacher. And she owned her own house. I owned my own house. But here I am taking her to Junkers because I'm telling her how, we could wholesale deals too besides our jobs. Or we could buy them and fix and flip. Like there's all this real estate stuff. And I don't know, that really wasn't your thing in the beginning.
Yeah. First I thought you were crazy. I'm like, why are we going to these yucky houses? I don't want to be, taking our time off. And so it wasn't until you actually purchased our first rental property that we had to fix up before we could put a renter into it. And then we slowly added one after another. And I realized, holy cow, like this is a business.
So what we were doing was we were paying cash for these junkers. We would renovate them, make them nice. We'd rent them out, refinance it, and then repeat it. And I didn't know that was Burr until she said this about like 3-4 years ago.
Yeah. On Instagram, I started realizing, this is like a term here. Like we're doing this already.
Yeah. So we were doing that and life was good. Had a job. We got married. Jenn walked away from teaching. My car dealership job kept going up the ladder.
Had a couple kids.
Yeah. I had a couple kids in the meantime. And then I just happened to be at the bank. It was 2016. And I was refinancing out of another one of our properties. And my friend at the bank says, Joe, at 10 mortgages, the bank's going to cut you off. So, we're going to cap you at 10. So you might need to figure something else out if you're going to plan on going more than that. And I knew we wanted to. So I went back home and I remember feeling a little sad about it, but I started going on YouTube. Now it's a thing. And there's Ron LeGrand again. Still going. And, he's talking about now how to buy these turnkey, what he calls pretty houses, like doesn't need work, no renovations, not having to manage contractors, and how you could buy these houses without banks, without using your credit, and really, not having to come up with like 20% down like you typically would, which
Right.
was like, ching, like, yeah, let's go do this. So that's really, we dove into it, hired one of his guys as a coach, and did some mailing. And within a couple months, we did our first creative finance deal, which was a turnkey house about, I don't know, 8-10 minutes from where we lived. We bought that deal with $100 down. We had a $500 payment at a 0% mortgage.
Wow.
And that's what really lit the fire, because we were like, okay, yeah, from now on, we could buy houses without banks. And when you buy with $100 down, pay $3,000-4,000 in closing costs, that's what really helped our business take off. And that's what made us fall in love with creative finance, was just that.
Right. And, creative finance is such an all encompassing term, right?
Mhm.
There's what it sounds like that first deal was a complete seller finance.
Yep.
They own the property outright. So you were just able to pay them over time in equal monthly installments, versus subject to, which is when you're taking over the mortgage. Do you do both types of deals or others?
Yeah.
Or do you typically go after a certain type of property that you can do 100% seller finance?
So we go after both. Our very next deal was just that. We had a seller reach out to us. She had a house she lived in before she got married. She got married, moved in with her husband at their house, had this other backup house. They were renting it. And then, it's one of those things where the tenants literally took off at like midnight, like took their couches out of the house and never paid it and ran out. So she had this house and she didn't want to manage it anymore.
She didn't want to make those mortgage payments on it anymore.
Yeah. So she reached out to us. We bought that. Now it's very close to subject to, but we bought it what's called a wrap.
Okay.
Very similar. Wraps are usually a little bit more protection for the seller. We're from upstate New York, and it's an attorney state. And if you try to buy a house in New York, going through 2 attorneys subject to, it is almost impossible because their lawyers don't want to close it. But if you do it with a wrap, because it protects the seller a little bit more, our attorneys were doing it. And we just started doing now these deals in New York too. So we kind of fell in love with both styles, free and clear properties that we could, negotiate terms. And then there's a bunch of these properties where they do have a mortgage. We could buy it, but the loan stays in the seller's name, and we just take over making those payments on their behalf. And the benefit of that is you don't need a bank approval to do it. They don't need to run your credit or see 2 years of income, or we got income and credit, but we don't have to use it. And that's the benefit of doing that. And you could scale now. And that's where we just saw the writing on the wall, that if you're going to scale a business, having to, buy a house, renovate it, go through all that stuff, like, it's a lot of time. And when you're buying these houses that need a lot of work, you're now managing contractors too. And, I'd love to say all contractors are great and everything goes perfectly as planned, but and we know that's not always the case. So when you can buy these turnkey houses that don't need any work, and I'm doing it with $100 down and a few thousand in closing costs, we still do the junkers, but I definitely prefer these houses instead.
Yeah. And I want to get into that and how you're specifically pulling the data, how you're targeting these particular type of properties. But explain a wrap to someone that doesn't know exactly the difference, other than that it's more protection for the seller.
Okay, so I'll explain it on when we did a deal. It's just a little bit easier that way. So we bought a house in New York, in Rochester. Beautiful house, beautiful neighborhood. The seller and we agreed to a price of $290,000 for the house. Now the seller owed $230,000 on the property, so he has $60,000 of equity. But we bought the deal with $100 down. So how do I buy that on a wrap? So imagine if he had $230,000 with like a circle around it and a little bubble, 230. That's what he owed the lender. And then he's got a second bubble with 60,000, a little circle around that bubble, right? And that's what his equity was. Well, our bubble wraps around both of those at the 290 price. And in the terms that we describe on the purchase and sale agreement, it shows that we're buying it for 290 on a wrap. We're going to take over their existing payment. It was, including taxes and insurance, is about $1,700 a month. They have a 2.75 interest rate. So we were like, yay, like that's a great deal.
Right.
And we bought it with $100 down. So inside the details, when we closed that, The only difference is with a wrap, the attorney closing it or title company, depending on what state it is, but we prefer attorneys, is they're going to draw up what's called a new note. It's basically paperwork showing that you are going to be making the payments on what terms you agreed on. And inside of this note, it also says if the buyer, for any reason, doesn't pay, the seller can foreclose and take the property back. Now, when you do subject to, there's no note. All that seller is doing is just deeding you the property, hoping that you're going to pay. But if you don't pay, there are some challenges to getting the house back with subject to. Now, that goes by a different state. In some states, you could do some preliminary paperwork, make it a lot easier to get it back. But in places like New York, it's a lot harder.
Got it.
So that's why a lot of the attorneys prefer to buy on a wrap, because now it's written right in the mortgage. Joe and Jenn doesn't pay, or somebody doesn't pay, whoever that buyer is, the seller can now foreclose, take that property back from you. So that's what we like wraps. Once again, there's no loan. I didn't go to the bank to get this paperwork. I didn't have to get my credit checked. All it is just a few pieces of paper the attorney drafts up in that big pile of closing docs you get. It just slid in there. One more thing you had to sign. And in it, it just outlines the terms that you agreed on.
Got it. Do you still have to notify their lender in this case?
You never notify the lender.
Got it.
Whether you buy subject to or whether you buy with a wrap, we don't call the lender and say what I'm doing. I don't ask for their permission. All we do is we just set it up with their online portal that we now make the payments directly to the bank. We now will upload the insurance policy. The new policy is us, the owner, but we do it the right way. So it's important to set that up the right way. And we upload our new policy through the portal to the lender and start making payments.
Got it. Love it. So for your particular and preferred type of property, right? Something that looks better. And I know you do them both. So, 100% seller finance. So there's no mortgage, 100% equity, right? Versus the other properties that there is a mortgage in place. How are you pulling data? Are these two different lists? Or is there a certain way that you go out and find the type of properties that are ones that you would put into your portfolio?
Yeah, so that's a great question.
Yeah, we actually don't pull lists. At this point, we, in 2020, really went hard into social media marketing.
Nice.
And we absolutely love Facebook. So all of our sellers are reaching out to us, which is really nice because they have houses that they want to sell, presumably. So what we've gotten really good at is determining, how we can best help that person. So we ask them just a series of questions. And based on those questions, they're basically telling us like what kind of deal it is, right? Is it a mortgage? Is it a seller finance? Could this be a cash deal? Could we wholesale it? So we're very open and we're very flexible and we let that be known. So we do run sponsored ads on Facebook, but there's also free ways that you could do this as well.
Love it. I mean, I want to learn a little bit more about that because I've had some experience in Facebook ads, and I found originally, and this was a few years ago, maybe 4, that I was getting a lot more tire kickers on a Facebook ad than like a specific pay-per-click or, pay-per-lead type situations where somebody's saying like they for sure want to sell their house. Is that something that you guys have also experienced, or is it that you're just doing so much marketing dollars at this specific channel that you're still able to just kind of weed out and get the best of the best?
So, I mean, just like anything else, you're going to have your prospects and your suspects, and us, our jobs are to weed out who is who and what is what. Just like anything else, I feel like on Facebook, you do have a ton of people reaching out to you that maybe they're just frustrated because their house is listed with a realtor and it's not selling and they need to sell it for some reason. Sometimes you have just somebody who, what's my house going to be worth in 2030? I'm thinking about selling it in 6 years from now. So you do run into that from time to time. But then you also run into a lot of people where they're in a situation and they really need to sell. And now the thing I love about Facebook, I could target a whole state. I could target cities. It doesn't matter. And what happens is we've done super high-end multi-million-dollar properties that we found. You wouldn't think if you have a multi-million-dollar property that you want to sell, you would reach out to some Facebook thing that comes across your thing. But
when you're just scrolling, your feed and you just see something. Right?
Yeah, we get multi-million-dollar our properties that they're coming to us with. And then we get the $10,000 mobile home in the middle of nowhere too. We get them all. So part of what we kind of found is a little bit of a secret to helping that is when a seller sees our post, they're reaching out to us. And the magic goes down in the DMs. So we have some questions that we ask, and we message the seller back and forth a handful of questions. And the way our questions are asked is the seller's actually giving you the offer too. Would they be open to seller financing? Yes, no, or maybe. Tells us their motivation, time frame, what they owe on the property, what do they need for it. And if they say no to seller financing, what's the lease will take in cash? And then what happens is now we have that data. And after I have that information, it used to be me, but now we have somebody who works for us and she analyzes that. And if I get 10 leads in a day, there might be 7 or 8 of them that kind of weed themselves out. So what our goal is to get on the phone with the good ones and kind of let a lot of the folks kind of weed themselves out through Messenger. And we found that to be the most efficient way to do it. And because of this, we're able to do deals virtually. So we don't have to go to a property. We never do. I mean, if we go to maybe one a year, it's just for because we're filming something. It's not because we really need to be there for any reason.
But like you said, you do get a lot of people, but you have to treat every comment, every response, everything that's coming in as if it were a true seller. So until you ask those questions, you can't rule them out. Because one of the properties I think Joe was mentioning was we had a comment on an ad and she said 900,000 and it's yours. And a lot of people might just disregard that, think, oh, okay, like that's probably just like a spam comment or she's just being silly. But she was honestly in a situation and we did help her out.
And that was like a $1 million property in Marco Island, Florida, which is like one of the 6th most affluent places in the whole country.
Yeah.
And there she was, just saw the post and put 900,000. It's yours. Shout out Jody.
Awesome.
But yeah, so that's
what
you
happens. Guys at this point, are you self-managing your Facebook spend? Have you found some good vendors to work with?
We keep a really close eye on it. You were just tinkering with it, but we do have a company that we've been working with since 2020. And, we're definitely always having her just keep an eye on things because there's a lot to do correctly or incorrectly when it comes to Facebook ads. So if you're just trying to like boost your own posts or anything like that, I would definitely, it's worth if you're an actual business to get somebody that knows behind the scenes of Facebook running ads because there are some things that are really important that she's great at. But I know that you've gotten pretty good at knowing where to hone in on and what parts of the country we really want to focus on. And because when you open up like nationwide, your cost goes down, but then you're just getting like in the middle of nowhere properties and it's really hard to comp. And now you're like, how am I even going to find a buyer? Do I want to buy over here in the middle of nowhere?
So, for example, we run sponsored ads in Florida, the whole state of Florida as well. Other places, but that's one of them. We were chatting yesterday with the young lady who runs our ads, and our cost per lead was like $7 per lead.
That's really good.
Now that does not include anybody who's also left a comment. Those are only the folks that reached out. So once you actually look at the comments, because we get a lot of deals from that too, our cost per lead, I bet you, is under $5 per lead.
Wow. And so, I think when I was using Facebook ads, it was like $1,000 a month management fee, and then whatever you wanted to spend. It was suggested to spend anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000, $3,000 or so. It is for what you guys are doing. What does that kind of look like per month for you to get the quantity and quality of leads? About how much is that spend per month in marketing? I'm trying to get a feel for, is this a viable channel for the average listener that may be spending money in cold calling or direct mail?
So there's a couple of really neat things. The thing I like about Facebook is you can set up what's called your daily budget, your daily spend. And what is also neat about Facebook is you can put a radius on things. So for an example, if there's a certain city I want to target, it's going to say, there's X amount of people in the city. And if you spend X amount per day, you're going to reach roughly these many people, right? But the thing is, if you have the same amount of dollars per day in expenditure, but you open up the radius more, you're going to get more leads. Spending the same amount of money. So that really depends on what you do. So our cost per day is around I think it's like 125. I think she said maybe 130. is what we spend per day on marketing. We generally get around, I would say, 10-ish leads a day.
Got it. And then out of those 10, what you would consider like a really strong lead, are you saying all 10 of those are really strong leads? Or
some of them are complete time wasters. So to find a really good deal, and I cherry pick, and I really do, because I want to make sure that I'm making a great deal for us, a great deal for the seller. And we're running into a lot right now where the deal just doesn't make sense. The seller will say yes to a deal. And I've got an example of one right now that we're working on here in Florida. The gentleman just bought his house in October. Turnkey house, remodeled, doesn't need a thing, but he's open to selling it for what he owes on it, which is around $380,000. He'll do the deal with no money down if we pay the closing costs, because he just wants to go. But then I'm looking at it, and I said, well, what's the payment with taxes and insurance and everything included in the loan? And it was a little over $3,000 a month. So once I put a pencil to that, and I'm looking at some rental comps in the area, some similar houses, they all rent between $1,900 and like $2,300. So those are the deals. We have to throw that one back in the water. And it's a turnkey house. It's beautiful. It doesn't need a thing. I could buy it with no bank approval. The only issue is his rate is so high, 7.23. So where we're picky is we snipe the deals and keep the deals that have a 2% interest rate, a 3% interest rate. So in essence, I might have to look at 100 deals before I could close one. Sometimes it's 200 before I could close one good deal. And then some of those sellers, here's the flip side, is they might say, Joe, no, we can't do seller financing. But we always ask, if we were to pay out cash, what's the least you'll take? And they just give us a really big discount. So now with that, we could either wholesale it, which we do a little bit of that, but more likely we buy them, clean them up, and then just relist them on the market again. And so I love that method. And so between doing both of those, you'll find deals.
Yeah. And I think that what is also helping, right, is you guys are you have so many different exit strategies that you can do, and you can do more with those leads. And so my next question is around how you're approaching each conversation. I know you're getting the information from your questions, right? But do you go straight full into creative finance and then back into, well, hey, if you would, we could pay all cash, like what's your best price that you would consider? Do you go that route? Or do you just let the conversation dictate how you work with the seller?
He calls it his straight line approach. He's very strategic with the questions. Having been in the finance in the car dealership, I feel like he had a really great way of talking to people, getting them comfortable answering questions. And so we always start with simple questions like, tell me why you're selling is question number 2.
Yeah. So we start off the questions really easy. So they're easy to answer. And I kind of almost equate it to like a tennis match, right? Like,
and by the way, are these the questions that are on the web form or once you get them on the phone?
They're on the script that we're just messaging through.
Yeah, usually we're just messaging back and forth in a Facebook Messenger.
Yeah. So we ask the 10 magic questions, and I kind of equate it to a tennis match. So I ask you a question, hit the ball to you. You answer the question, ball comes back to me. I ask you the next question. We get into this rhythm. So you're used to answering my questions. So in the beginning, I'm asking you, like, why are you selling the property? Can you tell me about the property? How soon do you want to sell this property? Does it need any work? Are there back taxes? Do you owe any money to contractors? How much do you owe on the mortgage? How much do you need for the property? But if I ask the question, how much do you owe on the mortgage is my very first question, I'll get shut down so quick. But now because it's question number 6 and we've already got the rhythm of playing tennis back and forth, and the easy questions, and they're getting a little bit more into it now. They'll tell us what they owe. They'll tell me what their monthly payment is. They'll tell me all of the things, what they want for it even. And then we say, fine, if I were to pay your price, would you be open to terms?
Yeah.
But they might say yes, no, or maybe. I don't care what they say. We still say, and if that doesn't work out, what's the least you would take for cash? So I know their cash number. I know what they'll do for terms. But the thing is, for me, the real meat of it is the first 3 questions. Because if you're telling me about your property and you're telling me I need to sell it because I've relocated out of state and I'm making 2 mortgage payments, and then how soon do you want to sell? And they're like, last week. Well, then what do I have there? I have somebody who's high motivation, maybe even some financial pain because of the situation. So if they say yes, no, or maybe to my, would you do seller financing? I don't care. I'm still putting them in a special folder where I'm going to follow up with them anyways. So if they say yes, great. Let's talk about that. Then we pick up the phone, and those are the ones we call. If they say maybe, we pick up the phone and we call those ones too. High motivation. If they say no, I really don't think that'll work for me, we still pick up the phone and make sure we talk to the highly motivated people. And if they still say yes, no, or maybe, follow-up sequence, here we go. For the one person who says, no, I don't want to do that, I just want to see what you'd give me for my house, right? And there's no motivation, like, all right, we'll follow up with you in 30 days. Maybe you'll get more motivated.
Yeah, right. And so I've found, that once you throw out like, hey, will you take terms, that, that conversation may be a little bit more difficult, especially for a virtual assistant or an acquisition manager that hasn't had that experience. And for the seller that is not experienced in selling property on terms or selling anything on terms for that matter, what's you guys' approach to really explaining it in a simple way to where they feel comfortable with it, and then you can move forward and try to close that deal out?
Well, I think you hit it right on the head, is making it a simple way. So when I hear some people say, oh, I'll buy your house with creative finance and
subject to,
and the sellers don't know what that means,
no,
guys.
It's very confusing.
You're going to confuse the heck out of the seller. So we have our acquisition manager do it. She started working for us as our babysitter. We found her on care.com.
Oh, wow.
She was 23 years old, just moved to Florida from Ohio. And she was looking for a job. So that's why she's babysitting until she found her job. And Jen offered her a job, and her first day on the job, she didn't know what Zillow even was. Like, I had to spell it for her and explain what that website did. So she had no experience, and now she does every one of these closing calls.
So it did take a lot of training, obviously. Joe,
what was that learning curve for her, at least on the just terms specifically?
I would say 90 days till she was making calls, doing it, having good conversations, small little tweaks. 6 months, she was great. Doing a really great job. And now she's been with us for just a crack over a year. I mean, she does it all. I don't call the sellers. I don't talk to them. I don't structure the deal. She'll just go back to me and say, hey, I've got one. Like, she just texted me right before this podcast, and we have one in Newport Richey, right north of Tampa. And the seller sounds like she's going to be open to doing seller financing. The house doesn't need a thing. So she'll write up the agreement with the seller, explain to them exactly how it works. And we kind of designed like a checklist / script where we're going to ask them final questions, answer any questions they have. But more importantly, Brandon, it's breaking down the conversation into really simple terms that anybody could understand. So there's zero confusion.
Yeah. And I think too, what really helped her was being able to take the pressure, and anyone listening, take that pressure off yourself. You don't have to make this deal on this closing call. You are still just gathering information. This is a house, right? It's a big purchase. So collect the information, and you're going to check back with your partner, and then you can get back to the seller, and just kind of like taking that pressure off yourself immediately, knowing like I have some time to like put together some numbers, and also just letting the seller know it's a delayed cash sale for full price. That was like our simple way of explaining it.
That.
And I feel like just those words alone kind of, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And people will understand like it's going to take a little while to get the full cash out. But if they're in a jam, like this opportunity, they're more than ready to rock when it's like a go.
Right. And I've heard folks, explain it like, hey, we're going to, make an offer to you, and it'll be equal monthly payments for X amount of years. You guys' deal making approach. Are you typically looking at something that, I guess it all depends on how they respond to your questions, but are you doing, with a 5-year balloon on a regular, like what's your kind of standard terms to go after for somebody that you have in your team to, try to put the deal together? Or do you really just let them, go by what is kind of dictated through the conversation?
A little bit of both, but I feel like this is like magic. Like this is gold, because we see a lot of deals floating around there with, these crazy terms that just don't make a lot of sense for a buyer. But, we just keep it simple.
Yeah, we actually ask the seller questions. And this is what I've learned from some of the best negotiators, part of the family, Ron the Grand. I see so many people where, especially when I first started, I'd want to make that offer and I'd end up putting my foot in my mouth by telling them what I want to do versus what are they willing to do.
Yep.
And once I kind of, spent the money, got the coaching, learned how to do better, I did better. And so what we do is we just ask the seller, if we could agree on terms, what's the least you'd sell the house for? They give me that number. Hey, Brandon, we typically buy with no money down. Okay. You say, okay, cool. We move on. You say, no, I need a down payment. Well, because I typically buy with no money down, what's the least you'd take to make this deal happen? Question number 2. Question number 3 is if they have a mortgage, I just want to confirm that the payment you have with, Bank of America is $1,100 per month, and that's including tax insurance, correct? Yes. Okay, good. Because if we could agree on everything else, that's the payment we'll start making to Bank of America on your behalf. We'll buy it. We're going to close on it. That loan with Bank of America will stay in your name, and we're just going to take over those payments just until I get you cashed out later on. Well, when is that? Question number 4. Well, some sellers will give me 20 to 30 years before I have to get them cashed out. Some might want it sooner, like 10 to 15 years. So, Brandon, what's the most amount of time you'd give me to get you cashed out? I get the number. You'd be surprised. That first deal I told you about, the wrap, the 230,000, he had 60,000 of equity. Don't forget that number, 60,000. I asked him that last question. What's the most amount of time you'd give me? He said, I'll give you 30 years. Perfect. Wrote up for 30 years. So I've got 30 years to pay off his loan and to give him his 60,000 of equity. So you've just asked the questions because I know in my head, I know what you're thinking. I know what she's thinking. There's no way this guy would wait 30 years to get his $60,000 because I know I wouldn't do that. I know none of y'all listening would do that. But you don't know what the seller's willing to do if you're able to help them in other areas.
Yeah.
So
do you even mention interest rate?
Well, I'm not paying any interest because I'm taking over his old mortgage.
Right. Okay. So in a seller finance situation.
Yeah. So on a seller financing, if there's no mortgage, right now I have to figure out what my new payment will be. I just ask very simple. If there's no payment, because it's a free and clear property, if I'm paying the taxes and insurance, what's the least you would take for the monthly payment? Usually they're going to hit you a number high, say, well, that probably wouldn't work. I'd need to be probably closer to here, but I always ask the question first. And then the same goes every time. Well, Brandon, so if I give you that $500 per month, that's going to go towards what I owe you and towards the principal, okay? And then when you say, okay, what did you just do? You agree to a 0% mortgage. So I'm not going to bring up interest rate. I don't say interest rate. Now, if they say interest, well, how much interest are you paying me? I say, well, I generally don't pay any interest because I'm paying top dollar for your house. And if I do pay you interest, you actually have to pay tax on that as income too. And I know usually people are trying to pay less in tax, not more. And I just shut up.
That's cool. Love that. And yeah, breaking it down. I mean, I really, really appreciate it. I'm curious now, the team, like how big of an operation is this? How many team members? I know you have an acquisition manager that you mentioned. You have somebody running the ads. Is there anybody else in the middle?
Yeah. So again, 2020, we took this full time. It was just Joe and I, and we've definitely dabbled in a larger team, but we realized it was much easier and simpler to kind of just scale down. So right now we have the acquisition manager, and she is a rock star full-time employee. We just recently hired a full-time executive assistant, and she's just been super helpful. I highly recommend doing that way sooner than we did. I'm so glad we found her.
First hire.
It should be, yeah, but no, I'm crazy. So, and then we also have a couple of virtual assistants. We brought them on board about a little over a year ago, and the one works asking those 10 questions when the sellers start reaching out to us on Facebook. She runs that script right through Messenger on Facebook. Everything goes into the CRM, which is really helpful. I also have a virtual assistant who helps me on the back end as far as social media posts, because if you're running sponsored ads, part of the secret hack most people don't seem to think about is actually having relevant content on your Facebook business page that you're running those ads on. So if you're spending ad dollars, you need to have stuff that people are seeing, like that's happening on your page. You don't want to be having a post from 2019 and, people are like, is this person even in business still? Like, what's going on?
Right.
And then we do have a dispo manager, a gal we just brought on. She's part-time commission-based because we do rent to own as our favorite extra strategy. So we're always looking for tenant buyers. And so right now she's looking for a tenant buyer for us up in New York.
Love it. Love it. And I mean, we could get into a whole nother, section of this, just talking about the dispositions and selling rent to own. I like that. Because then you have somebody that's more invested in the property. You're not worrying about tenants and toilets as much.
Mhm.
Is that just to quickly ask? I know that's your favorite exit strategy for some of these. What are some of the others? I know you mentioned earlier taking it down, cleaning it up, and listing it on the market. Is there anything else that you will do? Will you put a traditional tenant in any of these properties?
No, we
Nope.
would much rather do the tenant buyer. We have like two right now. We did inherit a tenant currently, so she's in one property. But ideally, we'd like to turn it into a rent to own. But yeah, other than that, turn around and list it, wholesale
Totally.
or assign the terms to an end buyer.
There
Yeah,
you
and,
go.
we love rent to own because if I have to buy a house, $100 down, 5,000-6,000 in closing costs, I got to put an insurance policy on there. I might need to do like landscape or paint, but usually they're nice, so there's not much there. You might come up with 10, 12,000, 15,000 out of pocket, sometimes more. So the reason why we also love rent to own is because when our renters move in, they're giving us 10, 20, 30, $40,000 of a non-refundable option deposit. So we're actually in a lot of these situations buying a house with no credit needed. If we have to come up with some cash in the beginning, we get that right back, but we're also sometimes in many instances getting over what we came out. So we're actually getting paid to buy the house
Mhm.
that we didn't use any credit for, right? And then we're cash flowing per month. And once our renters, some of them buy it out, and we had 3 get us cashed out last year. And off that alone, that's what I used to make in my old job.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
And
you
we made
get,
a renter a homeowner, and that feeling is just incredible.
yeah.
Right. Right. For sure. How quickly are you trying to turn these around and getting somebody in the property?
We like to, I mean, it depends. Ideally, they have at least 1 to 2 years. And so if they just want to rent for a little while longer, sometimes they need more time. And we have that term length with our seller. We'll give them the time happily as long as rent's being paid on time. We don't bother them. We're good to go. But there's some situations where they just want to buy the house a little bit sooner or something arises like that house Joe was talking about. We had the city kind of breathing down our neck about something. So we're like, it's time to move along here. And they purchased it out, which we were super sad because that 30-year mortgage was really awesome.
Yeah. And just on the front end, I mean, for somebody that's looking to do kind of one of their first properties like this, right? The time is the clock is ticking from the moment you say, hey, all right, we're going to take this down, and then getting a tenant buyer in there. What would you advise a person that's trying to do that? Do they need to have a certain amount of reserves or already have built up a pipeline of tenant buyers? Like what kind of pitfalls can you help somebody avoid by giving them some good advice in that?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is if the seller isn't in distress and they're able to give you 90 days till first payment, that would be my first go
There you
to.
go.
Obviously, some of these sellers are having trouble with the second mortgage payment, so that might not be an option. Obviously, having some reserves set aside is very smart. You want to be mindful of that because when that payment is due to the bank, you have to make it. And then, you know,
Advertise the heck out of that thing.
yeah.
Rent to own. I mean, Craigslist, Zillow, Facebook. Put signs around the neighborhood. Put big signs in the driveway. And when you do, and everywhere you market, it's rent to own, all credit accepted, no banks necessary to move in today. All that kind of stuff. Your phone's gonna ring off the hook.
Hmm.
And so when that happens, if I'm buying a property and I know I'm going to be closing on it in 2 weeks, we want to start marketing it now, right? So maybe I don't have 90 days till first payment, and that's always our first move.
Right.
But like what Jen mentioned, sometimes like the one we're buying now, she doesn't have
Not
that
an
ability.
option.
She's living paycheck to paycheck, and now we're having to take over that payment once we close. We're even
Yeah.
having to make a back payment. So with that being the case, um, market the heck out of the property, have reserves set aside so you can be picky on who the right renter is because you don't want to have somebody who's got a couple grand to move in when somebody will give you 20, 30,000 to move in.
Right.
I also
You
just
have
thought of the lease option or lease purchase as an option too. You want to
Yeah.
share that? It's kind of a next level, but totally doable.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of people that just focus on that. I like you guys' model a lot. I was just going to ask, do you have a third party do due diligence, background checks, rental or employment verification?
Yes, absolutely. When you're looking for a tenant buyer, you want to take a couple extra steps. We have been using screenthetenant.com, Paul and Diane Ritter out of Pennsylvania, and they've been absolutely phenomenal. And you get back like a 75-page report. They pay the $50 fee per person. And so you're really knowing, are you putting the right person in the right house? Because they got to be able to afford that monthly payment. We don't ever want to put somebody in a situation where they can't actually buy that house. So it's really important to look at everything.
Very cool. Two other quick questions. One, I want to know kind of what makes you guys' approach different, because there's a lot of folks out here there are a lot of great coaches and mentors that are teaching, how to do things creative. What's your approach and maybe how is it different from some of the other coaches and investors that are out there?
Yeah, I would say there's a few things that are kind of been the most helpful for the clients that we work with. And I think number one is that Jenn and I are actual coaches. I've been a sales trainer my whole life. Jenn used to be a teacher.
Yep.
So where I know some folks, what they do is they like to just put you in a big group and, pray everybody gets a deal. And that doesn't really work. And I think the reason why we have such extremely high success rate with our clients is because we break it down into some small steps to do, like, hey, go out and do these 3 things this week and then report back to us next week. And then we're going to give you the next 3 things to do. And if you can complete that step by step thing, you're going to get success. Because I know when somebody gets into our program, they say, Joe, like step 20 is how to fill out an agreement. And the way my brain works best is I need to know how step 20 works before I'll do step 1. And I'm like, think about what you're saying. Absolutely not. Like do step 1 first and you'll be at step 20 and you'll realize step 20, fill out the paperwork, is probably one of the easiest things to do.
Right.
It used to freak me out. So I think that's a really big one, is just giving somebody that step by step of what to do. Because if you're in just watching videos on how to do this, it's so complicated at times. It's overwhelming. All the information just downpoured on you at once that you won't even know where to start. You won't even know where to take action. Where should I take that first step? Well, probably because we've been with our own staff for the last 4 years, training our own, 18, 19, 20-year-olds that are doing multiple deals for a very long time. We've kind of realized the success and how to do that. So that's, I think, number one, most important. The number 2 thing, and I'm not knocking any of you gurus, but you're going to get some of this now. Every single time I've ever signed up with a coach, they're typically, or many others that I never signed up with, they're all going to say, great, thanks for paying us for coaching. Don't put away your credit card yet, because now you got to go pay money to generate leads. And maybe not a ton, right? Maybe you pull a list and you're driving around door knocking. Yeah, right. I don't want to do that. I've cold called. I don't like doing that. I've done direct mail. That's expensive. You pay for PPC leads. You're going to spend $100, $200 per lead, right? Even Facebook has a cost behind it. So when we're working with a new client, what we explain to them is how to join Facebook groups, whatever city or market they want to target. If I want to target Nashville, Tennessee, I'm going to join a bunch of Facebook groups in Nashville, Tennessee. And then when I'm in these Facebook groups, I'm going to make a post. And that post says, does anyone have a house for sale that's not market ready? I'm looking to buy one in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And by putting a free post into a Facebook group, you'll have people reach out to you. And they're going to reach out to you in the DMs. You're going to text them the script. So the real bread and butter for our clients is you could do this with 0 marketing budget. And I know when I sign up with other clients or coaches before, you have to have, how much are you going to spend doing cold call, or, you got to get a dialer. You're spending, where we've realized you could run out of money.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. So now if we could generate all of the leads you want for free, you're not going to have a marketing budget you need. So now it's just making the magic happen in the DMs, get on the phone with the good ones, wrapping up the deals, go close that sucker. And that's the name of the game. So I think
and then make the money to then spend on marketing when you want to take your business that next level.
Well, and that's the whole point. So our coach has told us revenue in first position, which means before you go out and spend a whole bunch of money, you need to make money first.
Sounds like Tom Kroll.
Yeah.
Bam.
Damn. That's my guy.
Yep. So I think that's
Awesome.
really been the technique. And if you're just doing this repeatedly and you're not spending money for leads and you could just generate all the off market leads you want, it's not if you get a deal, it's just a matter of when you get a deal. And the reason I love Facebook is because if I pull a list the old traditional way, you think I'm the first guy that pulled that list
Right.
who reached out to those very same people. So they're probably getting hit up by multiple people. And on Facebook, those people usually haven't even been tapped. So many of these sellers that we're talking to, we're the first person they've ever talked to about this. So that's good and bad. Bad because, maybe they want to sell in 6 months and you're the first person they spoke to. But it's also great because usually they're not talking to 18 other investors who are all trying to cut your throat to save them, pay them a little bit more and take all the fun out of the deal.
For sure. And just the last one, with you guys' type of spending, you're, around $3,000 a month or so. Like how many deals are you expecting each month? And with the caveat of that spend that you're doing right now, is that specifically in one market or in your multiple markets at this point?
So we get to change the marketing. As effective yesterday, we targeted New York and Florida. Okay. We had it in a few more states, but it gets to be a challenge if you get into too many states because now I'm comping some, place in backwoods Indiana. And so that gets to be a little bit tough. So we go back to the two places that we know really well. We're happy you get 2, 3, 4 deals a month.
Nice.
So not setting the world on fire, you don't need to.
Yeah, but we've also learned too many deals at smaller spread is just so much time, energy, and money.
Yeah, well, and that's the point.
Yeah.
Well, and then the other piece to this, and I know this, but for the listener, I want them to understand, like, these deals are increasing your net worth, right? Because you're taking them down, mostly, right? And so 2, 3 deals a month, like, that's not just cash now. Like, that's cash sometimes, not in perpetuity, but, for the foreseeable future. So it's great. I love it.
Well, the neat thing about it is when we used to have a team, we used to have like 12 of us. We would do 8, 9, 10 deals a month, but then what we're doing is you make a $5,000 assignment. By the time you pay staff, marketing, there's nothing left for Jen and myself. Mm-hmm. So what we've really focused on is doing less deals, doing bigger, better deals, and focusing like that. So even though that we're not hitting the 10, 12 like we used to every month, we're making more money now.
Love it.
With a lot less headaches, which is way better too.
Right. Awesome. Real quick, a crazy deal, interesting story. Do you have one that you can think of for the deal diary section?
My gosh. I mean, there's a zillion crazy ones. I mean, we could talk about a lady who stole somebody's house. Others, we're in Florida. Okay. There's wild stuff happens, but we could talk about the most recent deal that we're doing, is Becky. So Becky reached out to us. She has a house outside of Buffalo, New York on a place called Grand Island. It's a nice part of town. Some of the Buffalo Bills players live over there. I think Josh Allen does, who's their quarterback. So it's a nice neighborhood. She has a house built in 2013. She put a big old pole barn out back, which is a really nice one. And she bought another house around the corner. And so Becky's in a little bit of a jam because she has a turnkey house that's beautiful, nice neighborhood. And it's sitting there vacant. And it's costing her $2,000 a month for the payment, plus to keep the heat on because it's the middle of the winter and all those things. And so she decides she wants to sell it. So we were filming our podcast 3 weeks ago. And as we're just doing our podcast, she's calling me. So I'm like, hey, who wants to see a seller call? I just pick up the phone and we start talking. Well, Becky will sell her house with seller financing with a wrap. She wanted $360 for her house. It's worth $400 as is. She wants $360 for her house, but all the wholesalers and cash people are offering her in the low 3s, high 200s. And I'm like, how dare they? Right? Like, I'm on your side, Becky. Right. She's like, I know I'm not going to give the house away, but I know it's worth more than this. So I said we'd buy it with seller financing. She said, that's fine. I said, we typically buy with no money down. She said, that's fine. I said, we'll buy it at your price. We'll take over your payment. What is that? It's $1,900 and some change. It rents for $2,600 to $2,800 as is, needing nothing. So it's a good cash flow deal. Becky's got a 2.5% interest rate on her current mortgage. So Becky turned in from Becky to Becky with the good rate. So we're able to buy a turnkey house. I think the closing costs would be what, $6,000 down, $6,000 for closing costs. We'll pay her $100 down, $6,000 in closing costs. Insurance policy would probably be $1,500. I think she's behind one payment. So we'll get that current, right? And then we're going to take over this house. So here we are buying a turnkey house. We're closing on it, I hope, next week. In a beautiful neighborhood for probably about $10,000 out of pocket with a 2.5% interest rate on it, where interest rates now are in the mid sixes. So we're 4 points less. And if I were to buy that house at her price and at today's interest rates, there's no way I could cash flow. The payment would be way too high. But this is why we love creative finance. Now, when we buy that house, Becky, with the good rate, I'm going to find a renter that's going to give us $30,000, $40,000 to move into that house. So ideally, Jen and myself will be up $10,000, $20,000 once we find the right renter. We're going to make that $600 to $800 a month because our renters are responsible for all the maintenance and repairs. It's actual cash flow. And then if they do buy us out, their price today is $400, but they're not going to buy us out for 2 years. So we might price that at $430,
Yes.
$440 range. So once they do get you cashed out, you also get a really big back end check, but we set it and forget it. So, if they're in there for a long time, we're happier because they're just paying it down. You write off depreciation. They love the property because they're going to get to own it. So they're going to treat it better than any renter ever would. And they've got, like you said earlier, kind of some skin in the game. So they're really excited about this opportunity.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm going to give you an air horn for that.
There we go.
I love it. That's a really good deal. It's an amazing deal. Awesome. Well, look, we've learned so much. You've broken it down, your simple way of taking and walking a seller through the DMs, right? To understand what the situation is, how you set up your team, what your marketing looks like, a bunch of amazing stuff. I really, really appreciate it. But I can't let you go without putting you through the lightning round. Are you ready for that?
Oh, giddy up.
Bring it.
All right, let's do it. So look, I have a series of rapid fire questions. You don't know the question. I don't know your answer. So just say the very first thing that comes to mind. What's one book that's been instrumental to you guys' growth as real estate investors?
Think and Grow Rich. The OG of PD, I like to call it. If you haven't read that a couple of times, you need to.
Yeah, that's a really, really good one. If you could have drinks or coffee with any one person, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Jeez. I don't even know how to answer that. I would have you answer that.
No,
one.
I'm thinking it's your turn.
I guess you. I'm going to put you up there. And you're alive, so that'll make it a lot easier. We'll see you hopefully next month at the Family Master.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. I'll take that. Cool. All right. What's your best advice for someone looking to do their very first creative finance deal?
You know what? You could start by just taking some action. Follow the people who are currently doing creative finance deals. Learn as much as you can from them. If it's where you have some missing pieces to the puzzle, like we did, hire a coach. And I think there's a lot of great ones out there, but get somebody who could be that big brother, big sister looking over your shoulder to walk you through step by step to make sure you're doing it all correctly.
Love it. Good stuff. What's one mistake on a deal specifically or business in general that if you could do it over, you would do it over?
I think for us, it was learning creative finance sooner. I was wholesaling in 2000. I was buying these houses in 08, 2009, 10, where the market was taking a dip. We were paying cash, renovating them, like we talked about burring. But if I knew creative finance back when that market was really dipping, oh my gosh, the amount of properties in portfolio, because since then, obviously, all of those properties have gone tremendously higher in value. So if I could have learned way back in the beginning that I don't need to go to the bank, W-2s, credit checks, my firstborn, run the mile under 4 minutes, like all the things, like this would have been so much easier.
Yeah, very cool. What's the financial goal for you guys as team for this calendar year? Or business goal in general? What are you guys looking to do as a team?
I mean, we have revenue goals that we're hitting, which is, hit 6 figures a month.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
If you woke up tomorrow with $500 million deposited into your personal accounts overnight, what's the first thing that you guys would go out and purchase with that newfound money?
Well, the first thing that comes into my head, I would love a beach house, but I know that's probably
the first thing I would do is nobody would see me for a good calendar year. I would get rid of my phone.
We'll be at the beach house.
I would be traveling the entire world with Jen and the kids.
Yeah.
There you go. I love it. And more real estate.
Then when we got back, we'd be buying tons of real estate.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right. What would you tell the person that's looking to grow and scale or just, get out of the deal here, deal there situation, what would you tell that person that's listening right now?
Just start taking it seriously. Block it into your calendar like you do your normal day job, a workout, a doctor's appointment. And if you don't schedule the time to, make a seller call or, do a little research on the area that you're looking to invest, like, it's not going to happen. We're all busy. We all have a lot going on. We can continue to make excuses, or you can start taking the action and make results happen. And, it comes down to how bad do you want it? What's your why? And just stay laser focused. It's okay to not be Netflix and chilling all the time. There's maybe a little bit of time for that. But if you have this goal of getting out of that little bit of a one here, one there, like, you got to go all in.
Yeah. I love that.
Boom.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Good job.
Last one. What does send more offers mean to you in your business?
Send more offers?
Send more offers. It's talk to more people. How many more people can you get out there and ask them these questions and see how you can help them? Because I think that was the part that pulled me in. I didn't love real estate at first, but when I started hearing the seller stories of these situations that they're in, like, it just moves you. People really do need your help. And if you don't get out of your own way, you can't help them. So you got to go talk to people and make those offers.
And if I could say one thing to add to that, because I think you did it beautifully. This business is as complicated or as simple as it is. It boils down to really a couple things. Generate leads. We told you how to do that for free. I don't care. You could go pay for them too, however you want to do it.
Right.
Generate leads, talk to people. That's that.
And make offers.
That's the name of the deal, guys. And what so many people do is, I just want to learn. Well, that's a form of procrastination. It actually happens when you start doing the business. So get leads, talk to people, make offers. Next thing you know, you're getting deals, and it just happens. So keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate this process.
Love it. Great stuff. Well, look, this was amazing. And I know we're kind of running over. It was such great information. I had a bunch of questions for you guys, but how can people reach out and learn more about you guys, follow you back, and then also learn how they can maybe work with you to learn this particular type of investing?
Yeah, we have an awesome Facebook community. So if you want to go to our website, creativefinanceplaybook.com, on there you'll find our Facebook, our Instagram pages, Jenn DelleFave, Joseph DelleFave. And we just love to share what we can. We go live every Tuesday on platforms, so you can come and join in on our fun.
Yeah, creativefinanceplaybook.com. That's why I have the cash flow, everything around me shirt.
I love it.
Yeah.
And all the references as well along the way.
Absolutely.
I love it. Awesome, guys. And the links to that will be in the show notes. While you're at it, head over to sendmoreoffers.com. There's nothing for sale there, but just a bunch of great information and show notes from all of our best guests. And if you're in Atlanta and you want to connect with me, need help getting the deal across the finish line, that is the best place to reach me, sendmoreoffers.com. This has been great. I really appreciate it, Jenn and Joe. Can't wait to see you guys, I'm sure, at one of the future masterminds. And I'll be following along your journey.
Bam.
Thank
Can't
you.
wait. Thank you so much for having us on today.
Good stuff. Guys, as always, send more offers, do more deals. Until next time, peace.
That's all for this episode of the Send More Offers Real Estate Show with Brandon Barnes. But we know you're craving more knowledge to get yourself ready for that next deal. To schedule a call with Brandon to learn more about how to do deals consistently without seller appointments in a repeatable way, be sure to visit us at sendmoreoffers.com. And be sure to tune in for the next episode of the Send More Offers Real Estate Show.